"Hands where I can see them!" Officer Travis Callahan barked, gun half drawn, voice sharp enough to cut through the heavy air of the parking garage. Before Ava Richardson could explain, he grabbed her by the arm, yanked her around, and slammed her against her own Lexus. The metal cuffs snapped tight, biting into her skin. Her forehead struck the door frame with a sickening crack. "You're under detention until we figure out what you're stealing," he said, breath thick with bourbon. Ava, dazed but composed, looked him straight in the eye and said quietly, "You just assaulted a federal prosecutor." The words didn't register. Callahan shoved her harder, shouting, "You think you can talk your way out of this?" The sound of her body hitting the steel echoed across the concrete, a moment that would soon shake an entire city. Before diving into this story, where are you watching from? Don't forget to subscribe to the channel and give this story a like, because what's about to unfold will show how one reckless act of power can burn down everything behind a badge. Heat shimmered off the pavement as Travis wiped sweat from his brow, muttering curses under his breath. It was supposed to be an easy patrol, one last quiet shift before his suspension hearing. But the moment he saw a black woman digging through a luxury SUV trunk, something inside him twisted, an old reflex, sharpened by years of bias and bourbon. He hadn't asked questions, hadn't checked ID, hadn't noticed the DOJ parking tag on the windshield. He just acted. The instinct that had saved lives in his early career now betrayed him completely. Ava stood cuffed beside her car, blood tracing down her temple. She wasn't scared. She was angry. 38 years old. A federal prosecutor with a spotless record. On her way to court to expose a $12 million corruption ring inside the same department this man served. Her briefcase lay open on the asphalt, files spilling out, pages fluttering in the wind like pieces of evidence trying to escape. Each page carried the name of an officer tied to stolen funds, falsified body cam reports, and cover-ups reaching all the way to City Hall. The evidence that could have cleaned the city was now smeared with dust and blood. Up above, a drone hovered quietly. Kayla Monroe, a Spelman College student testing her DJI Mini 4 Pro, froze at the sight on her screen. "Is that?" "Oh my God," she whispered, pressing record. The live feed began streaming to thousands of followers. The angle caught everything. The way Travis grabbed Ava's arm, the way she said she was a prosecutor, and the moment he ignored it. Kayla's pulse raced. She knew this would blow up, but even she didn't grasp how fast. Travis dragged Ava to his Explorer, ignoring her protests. "You have the right to remain silent," he barked. "You'd better use it," she tried again, voice calm despite the pain. "Check my credentials. Officer, there's a folder on the front seat." He sneered. "Save it for the judge." Her knees nearly buckled as he pushed her into the back seat, the cuffs cutting deeper. He turned off his body cam, muttering, battery low, though both of them knew it wasn't true. As the car rolled out of the garage, Ava stared at the rearview mirror. She saw her reflection, a woman who'd built her life on justice, now reduced to a suspect by one man's ignorance. Her phone vibrated on the dashboard with call after call from the FBI field office. But Travis didn't care. He just needed control, needed to prove to himself that he still mattered. Years of resentment, divorce, debt, disciplinary warnings had hollowed him out until only bitterness remained. At the precinct, two younger officers watched in confusion as Travis hauled Ava through the side entrance. "What's she charged with?" one asked. "Breaking into a vehicle," Travis said. "Could be stolen." Ava raised her hands, calm and precise despite the cuffs. "That's my car, and I'm the U.S. attorney for this district." Silence filled the room. The younger officer looked from her face to Travis's and stammered, "Wait, did you verify that?" Travis shot him a glare sharp enough to kill the question. "Book her," he ordered. "I'll handle the paperwork." The surveillance camera above the intake desk blinked twice, then went black. Another malfunction. Across town. Jalen Brooks paced outside the courthouse, phone in hand. Ava was late. Something that had never happened in 10 years of friendship. When he finally saw the viral clip spreading online, his blood ran cold. The caption read, "Black woman assaulted by Atlanta cop. She said she's a prosecutor." Within minutes, millions were watching. Justice. For Ava began trending as protesters started gathering outside the precinct gates, inside her holding cell. Ava sat alone on a narrow bench, the concrete cold beneath her feet. Her wrists were raw, her briefcase gone. She could still hear the echo of the officer's voice in her head, the arrogance that came from years of unchecked power. But beneath the pain, something else stirred. Resolve. She whispered to herself. They think they can bury me. Let's see how deep their hole goes. Meanwhile, on the 5th floor of the Atlanta Police Department, Chief Maria Delgado leaned over a conference table littered with news screenshots. Lock down the narrative. She ordered, no names, no leaks, if anyone asks. She's under review for resisting arrest. Her advisors nodded, but her eyes betrayed worry. She knew who Ava Richardson was, and what she had been investigating. If the story got out, the department wouldn't just lose credibility, it would lose everything. Back in her dorm room, Kayla Monroe stared at her tablet as the views climbed into the millions. She hadn't meant to start a movement, but she couldn't stop it now. She whispered, "They're gonna regret this," and hit upload full video. The uncut footage showed everything. The assault, the shove, the ignored warning. By sunrise, it had spread to every major network. The world would soon know what Atlanta's police had done, and who they'd done it to. For now. Ava sat in silence, head bowed but unbroken. She thought of her late mother, killed during a routine traffic stop years ago. The memory fueled her. The same system that had taken her mother was now testing her. She would not bend. When the cell door clanged shut behind her, she lifted her head and whispered one promise. Tomorrow, they'll remember my name. The clang of the metal door echoed through the corridor as Ava Richardson was shoved inside a narrow cell no bigger than a walk-in closet. The air was thick with bleach and sweat. A single flickering bulb cast her shadow against the concrete wall like a ghost that refused to fade. Her wrists were raw, still marked by the steel cuffs Officer Callahan had so proudly snapped shut an hour earlier. She sat down slowly on the cold bench, her thoughts racing faster than her pulse. The uniformed guard at the door didn't say a word, just locked the bolt and walked away, leaving her alone with the weight of silence. Her watch was gone. Her heels were gone. Even her phone, confiscated. Labeled evidence. But what chilled her most wasn't what they took. It was what she'd lost without realizing it. The corruption files she'd spent 8 months building. The same one that could destroy half of Atlanta's police leadership. It had vanished somewhere between the garage and the booking desk. She leaned her head back against the wall and whispered to herself, "They're not just arresting me. They're burying the case." At that same moment, in the roll call room down the hall, Travis Callahan sat slumped in a chair with his uniform collar open and his thermos half full of bourbon. He had convinced himself this was just another arrest gone sideways, that his superiors would smooth it out once they realized who she was. Still, something in him shook. His hands trembled as he unscrewed the lid and took a long swallow, the cheap whiskey burning its way down. The room smelled of sweat, dust, and denial. His body cam sat on the desk in front of him, screen cracked, the little red light dark. The SD card he'd yanked out lay beside it, still warm from the removal. He told himself it didn't matter. Cameras failed all the time. Everyone looked the other way. especially for a man with 22 years on the job and a medal from the Appalachia School Rescue. But even as he repeated that lie, he couldn't shake the sound of her voice. "You just assaulted a federal prosecutor." Across town. Jalen Brooks sat in his office surrounded by stacks of case files and a half-drunk cup of coffee. The live stream had already gone viral. His phone hadn't stopped buzzing since midnight. Every civil rights attorney, every journalist he knew was calling him. But all he cared about was finding Ava. He dialed the precinct again. His 17th attempt that night. The desk sergeant answered, the same dry tone as before. "She's not available for contact. She's a federal official." Jalen snapped. "You can't hold her without notifying her office." "Sir, I'm just following orders," the sergeant said, then hung up. Jalen slammed his fist against the desk, his chest heaving. He knew what this meant. Someone up top was stalling, probably under Chief Maria Delgado's direction. It was a strategy he'd seen too many times before. Isolate, intimidate, erase, inside the cell. Ava pressed her palms together, trying to steady her breathing. Every second mattered. Somewhere out there. Someone had her briefcase, the one with her DOJ credentials, the corruption logs, the names, the bank trails, and the evidence tying Atlanta PD to stolen forfeiture funds. She thought about the hearing she was supposed to attend that morning, the room full of federal officials now wondering why the lead prosecutor had vanished. She smiled bitterly. Let them wonder. She whispered. She wasn't beaten. She was waiting. Meanwhile, at police headquarters, Chief Delgado sat in her office with the blinds drawn. The phone on her desk buzzed every few seconds with updates, media calls, internal affairs alerts, protest notifications. She rubbed her temples, staring at the paused frame on her tablet. Ava's face pressed against the car, blood on her temple, Callahan's hand gripping her arm. "Delete it," she ordered softly. Her deputy frowned. "Ma'am, it's everywhere now." Delgado exhaled through her nose, the weight of her mayoral campaign pressing like a stone on her chest. "Then we need time. Keep her in custody until the fire burns out. No leaks, no comments." The deputy hesitated. "And Callahan? He's a fool, but a useful one." She said, "Protect the department first. Everything else can burn later." By 6 p.m., the precinct was surrounded. Protesters gathered outside with handmade signs, "Justice for Ava," "No more broken cameras," "We see you." The chants rattled the windows. Kayla Monroe stood among them, her drone hovering overhead, streaming live. Her feed had hit 15 million views, the number climbing by the second. She'd received threats, offers, even fake subpoenas, but she didn't care. She had the footage, the truth, and a million people behind her. Into her mic, she said. They thought no one would see, but we did. And we're not shutting up. Back inside. Ava could faintly hear the noise through the walls, the crowd's rhythm like a heartbeat pulsing in the distance. It gave her strength. She stood and examined the small vent above the door, whispering as if the concrete could listen. They can lock me up, but they can't lock out the truth. She noticed the corridor light flicker outside her cell, the camera above the door blinking twice before going dark. Another malfunction, another lie. She knew this playbook. She'd prosecuted cops for it, disable the feed, delay the log, rewrite the report, but they'd made one mistake. Millions were already watching, down the hall. Travis watched the protests on a muted TV. The footage of himself was everywhere. His face, his badge number, the shove, the blood. He felt exposed, naked in a way no vest could protect. He told himself he didn't mean for it to go that far. He just wanted control, not chaos. But the more he watched, the more he realized he'd lit a fuse that couldn't be put out. His captain walked in, jaw tight. "You've done it now. Travis, the feds are calling. You better pray she doesn't press charges." Travis's hands shook. She was reaching for something in her car. She was reaching for her badge. The captain snapped, "You cuffed a federal prosecutor on camera. God help you. By midnight." Ava still hadn't been processed or charged. The official logs listed her as unidentified female detainee. She laughed quietly to herself, the absurdity sinking in. Unidentified. She muttered, "They know exactly who I am." Her body ached, but her mind sharpened. Every detail mattered: the timing of the arrest, the missing file, the flickering cameras, the silence from Delgado's office. This wasn't random. It was a cover-up. She closed her eyes and began replaying every face she'd seen that day, every officer's badge, every whisper she'd overheard. Her prosecutor's brain was already building a case from inside the cell. Outside. Kayla's drone zoomed in on the jail's front entrance, where a group of protesters linked arms to block police cruisers. One voice shouted, "She's one of us!" Another yelled, "We won't leave till she walks free!" The chants rose like a storm. Angry, raw, unstoppable. In the roll call room. Travis took another drink and stared at the wall, his reflection trembling in the cracked TV screen. For the first time, the weight of what he'd done began to settle. The woman he'd cuffed wasn't some random suspect. She was the law he claimed to uphold. He buried his face in his hands and whispered, "What have I done?" Ava sat up straight, hearing the crowd's roar grow louder somewhere beyond those walls. Justice was waking up, and for the first time that day, she smiled. "They see me now," she said softly. "They finally see. At exactly 3:12 The city was asleep. But the internet was on fire. In a dim dorm room at Spelman College, Kayla Monroe sat cross-legged in front of her laptop, heart pounding as she hit upload. The full 4K drone footage, uncut, unfiltered, with every second of the assault intact, was about to change Atlanta forever. Her trembling fingers tagged every major civil rights account she could find. Within minutes, the clip exploded across X, TikTok, and YouTube. By sunrise, it had 72 million views. Hashtags flooded timelines. National anchors picked up the feed, and even the mayor's office couldn't ignore it. Commentators called it the spark of the summer. For Kayla, it was more than a video. It was proof. She'd stayed awake for 30 hours straight, reviewing every frame, enhancing the sound, stabilizing the image, making sure the world would see exactly what happened. The shove, the blood, the body cam going dark, the voice of Ava Richardson, calm and clear, saying, "You just assaulted a federal prosecutor." When she hit publish, she whispered, "Now they can't bury her." Across town, the Fulton County Jail erupted in chaos. By 7 a.m., over 3,000 protesters had gathered outside, waving signs that read, "Justice for Ava," "No more malfunctions," and "Hands off our daughters." The chants echoed down the concrete halls until even the inmates joined in, banging on their doors in rhythm. Ava could hear it from her cell, the steady drum of defiance that made the walls tremble. She stood by the small window, eyes closed, letting the sound wash over her. For 12 hours she'd been treated like a criminal. No phone call, no lawyer, no food since noon the day before. But now, the world knew. She smiled faintly. "You see me now," she whispered. "And you'll see them too, in the precinct conference room." Chief Maria Delgado stared at the headline running across the live news feed. Federal prosecutor wrongfully detained by Atlanta police officer. Drone footage sparks nationwide outrage. Her staff looked pale, waiting for her reaction. Delgado's campaign manager sat in the corner, silent, watching the donations tracker on his phone crash by the second. "We can't contain this," he said finally. "It's everywhere. CNN, MSNBC, even the BBC." Delgado rubbed her temples. "Get Callahan off the street, effective immediately." "He's already suspended," an aide replied, voice shaking. "But the FBI's calling." "Ma'am, they want the body cam footage." Delgado glared at the screen. Tell them it malfunctioned. The aide swallowed. That's what we said about 1,200 other cameras this year. Then make it 1,201. She snapped. Do your job. But her voice cracked on the last word. She knew this was different. This wasn't some backroom scandal she could bury under paperwork. This was viral. This was alive. In a cramped apartment on the east side, Travis Callahan sat alone in the dark, TV flickering across his unshaven face. Every channel was showing him, his name, his uniform, his mistake. The proud officer once called the Appalachie hero was now America's villain. He watched the footage on loop, eyes bloodshot, whiskey untouched on the table in one shot. The drone caught the reflection of his own face in the car window as he slammed Ava against it. He didn't recognize himself. The rage, the arrogance, it was like watching someone else. His phone buzzed non-stop, reporters, union reps, old partners, but he ignored them all. When he finally answered one, his voice was barely a whisper. Tell them I didn't mean it. But no one cared about his excuses anymore. Meanwhile, in a dimly lit law office downtown, Jalen Brooks sat at his desk surrounded by glowing monitors. He'd pulled up the drone footage, synced it with precinct timestamps, and found something everyone else had missed. A second camera, one of the traffic feeds near Piedmont Park, had caught the moment Travis reached up and turned off his body cam. That clip alone proved intent. Jalen felt the old fury rise in him, the kind that never faded since his mother's killing by police when he was 10. Not this time. He muttered, not again. His phone buzzed. A message from an unknown Proton mail address popped up. Backup drive in my house. Desk drawer. Password Mac 2006. Don't let my dad hurt anyone else. Jalen's pulse quickened. The email was signed simply. Marcus. He didn't know it yet. But that message, sent from a 19-year-old disowning his father, was the key to everything, inside the jail. A guard unlocked Ava's cell. You got visitors, he said curtly. She expected Jalen or a DOJ rep, but instead 2 FBI agents in dark suits stepped in. Ms. Richardson, one said, voice low but firm. We're aware of your detainment and the missing case file. We're investigating an internal breach tied to Officer Callahan. Ava straightened her back, eyes sharp. Then you already know what's missing. We do, the agent replied, and we intend to find it. Start with his house, she said without hesitation. He took it. They exchanged a glance. You're certain? I prosecuted men like him for years. She replied, he fits the pattern. Rage, pride, cover-up, check his drawers. He keeps his secrets close, outside. The protesters' chants shook the city awake. Students from Spelman and Morehouse flooded the streets, joined by community leaders, lawyers, and even off-duty firefighters. News drones circled overhead like hawks. One shot captured the image that would define the movement. A line of young black women standing shoulder to shoulder, fists raised, chanting Ava's name. It was raw, it was loud, and it was unstoppable. By late afternoon, the FBI had quietly begun their parallel investigation. Agents intercepted traffic feeds, subpoenaed radio logs, and traced data from the precinct servers. What they found shocked even seasoned investigators. Travis's deleted body cam files weren't deleted at all. They had been transferred to an external drive under his personal login. The evidence Ava had been compiling for months. The corruption file she thought was gone, was likely sitting in his house right now. Jalen, armed with Marcus's email, sent the tip directly to the Bureau's Digital Crimes Unit. Within minutes, a warrant was drafted. As dusk settled over Atlanta, Travis sat in his living room with the blinds drawn, drinking straight from the bottle. On the muted television, his own son's social media post flashed across the ticker. My father's actions don't represent me. Justice matters more than blood. He dropped the glass, watching it shatter across the floor. somewhere deep inside. He knew it was over. He'd spent years hiding behind a badge, pretending the uniform still made him a hero. Now, even his own child had turned away, at the jail. Ava was finally released under federal supervision. As she stepped outside, the roar of the crowd hit her like a wave. Hundreds of phones pointed at her, flashes bursting through the night. Kayla was there too, drone hovering above her head, capturing the moment live. Ava raised her hand, her voice steady but full of conviction. "I'm not the only one who's been silenced," she said, "but tonight, we make sure none of them are forgotten." The crowd erupted, the chant of her name echoing across the city. From her office window at City Hall, Chief Delgado watched the live feed on mute. Her reflection merged with Ava's image on the screen. Two women on opposite sides of a collapsing system. She whispered to herself, "God help us all." And as midnight approached, an unmarked FBI SUV rolled quietly through Decatur. Lights off, engines low. Inside sat 3 agents, a warrant folder on the dashboard, and one simple goal: find the missing drive before it vanished for good. Ava's whisper in the cell had become prophecy. "They're silencing me." But what none of them knew was that the truth was already waiting, locked inside a drawer, ready to bring the whole department to its knees. At 4:47 a.m., the quiet streets of Decatur shattered under the rumble of armored tires and the synchronized footsteps of 12 FBI agents moving in formation toward a modest brick house at the end of Hemlock Lane. The neighborhood slept, unaware that within seconds, one man's secrets were about to ignite the biggest law enforcement scandal in Atlanta's history. Inside, Travis Callahan lay passed out on the living room sofa, a half-empty bottle of Evan Williams bourbon dangling from his hand, the TV casting a pale glow over his unshaven face. The door splintered open with a single strike. "FBI! Search warrant!" shouted the lead agent as flashlights and laser sights painted the walls. Travis jolted awake, disoriented, reaching instinctively for his holster that wasn't there. 2 agents tackled him to the floor before he could stand. His head hit the carpet with a dull thud, and in that dazed moment, he finally realized the badge that once made him untouchable meant nothing now. They dragged him upright, his robe half open, cuffs biting into his wrists. His ex-wife, Laura, appeared at the top of the stairs in a nightgown, clutching a phone she never got the chance to dial. Behind her, Marcus stood still, eyes hollow. "Dad," he said quietly. "They know everything." The agents swarmed through the house, methodical and silent. One opened the drawer in Travis's study, pulling out a matte black hard drive labeled APD footage, backups. Another found the missing corruption dossier, still sealed in its DOJ folder, Travis's fingerprints smudged across the cover. The agent in charge lifted it like evidence from a crime scene and turned to Marcus. "This what you told us about?" Marcus nodded, trembling slightly. "He kept everything, said it was for leverage, but I knew one day it'd destroy him." Travis tried to speak, voice shaking. "You don't understand. I saved lives. I saved 12 kids in that school. I'm not the bad guy here." His words cracked under the weight of panic. "I was doing my job. These people, they twist everything." But the agents didn't respond. One read him his rights as another bagged the evidence. For the first time in 22 years, his name, once a symbol of bravery, was being read aloud as that of a suspect. He sank to his knees, mumbling, "I was a hero." Marcus looked down at him and whispered, "You were. Once. But you let the hero die a long time ago." The raid was over in 9 minutes. Neighbors peeked through curtains as the FBI convoy rolled away with Callahan in the back of a black SUV. His head bowed, his lips moving soundlessly as if reciting an old prayer. The local news helicopters arrived seconds later, lights cutting through the dawn fog. A reporter's voice broke through the static. We are witnessing the arrest of Officer Travis Callahan, now accused of obstruction, evidence tampering, and theft of federal property within an hour. Callahan tapes hit #1 worldwide, back at FBI headquarters. The recovered drive was decrypted under tight supervision. 47 deleted body cam videos filled the screen, each one a silent confession. There were scenes of illegal searches, unprovoked assaults, and falsified reports spanning 4 years. One clip showed Travis handcuffing a young black teenager behind a gas station, yelling slurs, then cutting the camera when backup arrived. Another showed him turning off his body cam before a violent arrest, just like he did with Ava. The footage didn't just incriminate him, it implicated dozens of officers across multiple precincts. The stolen corruption dossier from Ava's briefcase tied it all together. Names, dates, bank transactions, shell companies. A full web of deceit now laid bare. When the news reached Chief Maria Delgado, she locked herself in her office and stared at the evidence feed streaming live from the bureau. Her campaign manager's voice shook as he read the headlines. Mayor's candidate linked to APD cover-up. Federal prosecutor assaulted by veteran officer. Evidence seized in early morning raid. She lowered her head into her hands. "It's over," she whispered. "Everything I built. Gone." But even then, part of her mind calculated survival. "Get me a statement," she ordered. Eyes hollow. "We'll say we're cooperating fully." The manager hesitated. "And Callahan?" "Disavow him," she said coldly. "He's a disease. We cut him out." At that same hour, Ava sat in a quiet conference room downtown, released but still bruised, flanked by federal agents and Jalen Brooks. Her temple was bandaged, her wrists red, but her focus was razor sharp. When the lead investigator slid the recovered dossier across the table, she let out a slow, shaky breath. "You found it," she said softly. "We did." The agent replied, "And more." They played one of the body cam clips on a monitor. Ava watched in silence as Travis's voice filled the room. Taunting, commanding, cruel. She felt the anger rise, but she kept her expression steady. "This isn't just about him," she said. "This is a system built to protect men like him. We tear it down piece by piece." Jalen leaned forward, nodding. "Then let's start with this drive. You can't just prosecute him. You expose them all." Ava looked up, eyes steady. "That's exactly what I intend to do. In Decatur." Marcus stood on his porch as the FBI cars disappeared down the street. His mother came to stand beside him, hand trembling as she lit a cigarette. "You did the right thing," she said softly. He nodded, but didn't answer. The air smelled of wet asphalt and smoke. For 19 years, he'd lived in his father's shadow, a man the city once called a hero, but whom he knew as a drunk, a bully, and a coward. Watching him taken away didn't bring joy, only relief. "I'm done carrying his name," Marcus said quietly. "Tomorrow, I'll make it official." By mid-morning, every major outlet in the country was running the story. Officer who assaulted federal prosecutor found with dozens of deleted body cam videos. News anchors called it the reckoning of Atlanta PD. Talk shows debated whether the department could ever recover. Crowds outside City Hall chanted Ava's name as both symbol and warning in his holding cell at the federal building. Travis sat on the edge of his cot, face buried in his hands. The hangover from years of denial finally hit him full force. The sound of the lock turning made him flinch. An agent entered with a file in hand. "Mr. Callahan, you're being charged with multiple counts, civil rights violations, obstruction, tampering with evidence, theft of federal documents, and perjury. You'll be transferred to federal custody." Travis looked up, eyes wet. "I didn't mean for any of this," he muttered. The agent's expression didn't change. Meaning doesn't matter anymore. The evidence does. The door closed, leaving him in silence broken only by the faint hum of the ventilation system. and the echo of his own regret. As dawn broke fully, Atlanta's skyline gleamed gold against the chaos below, in the federal office downtown. Ava stood by the window overlooking the courthouse, sunlight catching the bruise on her forehead. She whispered to herself, "This is where the real work begins." Behind her, the recovered evidence flickered across the screen. The faces of officers she'd soon face in court, frozen mid-lie. The raid had ended, but the trial, the reckoning, had just begun. 3 days later, the courtroom was packed wall to wall, the air humming with tension. Cameras lined the marble aisles, reporters whispered into microphones, and the people of Atlanta held their breath at the prosecution table. Ava Richardson sat tall in a charcoal suit, her expression calm but unyielding. Every bruise on her face told its own story. But she didn't hide it. She wanted the jury to see what unchecked power looked like, across from her. Travis Callahan slumped behind his defense attorney, hair slicked back, eyes swollen from sleepless nights in federal custody. His once proud posture was gone, replaced by the defeated slump of a man staring down the wreckage of his own choices. When the judge entered and the courtroom rose, the gravity of it all settled in. This wasn't just another misconduct case. This was the trial that would decide the fate of an entire department. United States versus Travis Callahan. The clerk read aloud, her voice echoing through the chamber. 8 counts, civil rights violations, obstruction of justice, evidence tampering, theft of federal documents, assault of a federal prosecutor, and abuse of authority. The judge turned to Ava. "Ms. Richardson, you may proceed." She rose slowly, her words deliberate and sharp. "Your Honor, ladies and gentlemen of the jury, this is not a case about one bad officer. It's a case about a culture that believed it could act without consequence. It's about a man who forgot that the badge on his chest was a promise, not a weapon." She paused, eyes locking on Travis. "And it's about the moment the people of this city decided enough was enough." The first piece of evidence was the drone footage. The courtroom lights dimmed as Kayla Monroe's recording filled the screen. High definition, clear, devastating. The jury watched as Travis slammed Ava against the Lexus, blood glistening on the doorframe. They heard her calm, steady voice say, "You just assaulted a federal prosecutor." Then the frame caught him reaching to turn off his body cam. Gasps filled the room. The defense attorney objected, claiming emotional manipulation, but the judge overruled it. "The jury will see the full truth," he said firmly. Next came the body cam archive recovered from Travis's home. Ava clicked through the files like a surgeon making incisions, each one a wound exposing the rot beneath. One video showed him pulling over a teenage boy, cursing and threatening, before shutting off the camera. Another captured a raid where suspects were beaten after surrendering. The courtroom fell silent except for the mechanical hum of the playback. By the time the 47th video ended, one juror had tears in her eyes. Ava stood by the screen, voice quiet but cutting. "These are not isolated incidents. They are patterns. They are choices. And they have cost lives, dignity, and trust." When Marcus Callahan was called to the stand, the room shifted. The young man walked up slowly, wearing a simple gray suit, his hands trembling slightly as he was sworn in. He avoided looking at his father. "Mr. Callahan," Ava began gently, "can you tell the court why you contacted federal authorities?" Marcus's voice wavered, but he didn't falter. "Because I couldn't live with it anymore. I saw what he did. I heard the things he said about people. About her." He glanced briefly toward Ava, then away. "After he broke my ribs last year, he came into my room drunk," he said. "They'll never touch me. I am the law." I recorded it. A hush fell over the courtroom as the audio file played. Travis's slurred voice filled the speakers. You think anyone can stop me? They all owe me. The chief, the union, every last one of them. The defense tried to object, but the damage was done. Ava walked closer to the jury, her voice steady but burning with quiet fire. That arrogance is what happens when a system forgets to police itself. But today, accountability begins. She thanked Marcus, then added softly, You showed more courage than most men twice your age. The young man nodded, his jaw tight, tears threatening but held back. Travis stared down at the table, face ashen, unable to meet his son's eyes. Later that afternoon, Kayla Monroe took the stand. She wore a navy blazer over her Spellman t-shirt, hair tied back, posture firm. The defense attorney tried to dismiss her as an activist chasing fame, but she didn't flinch. I wasn't chasing fame. She said, I was chasing truth. If I hadn't filmed it, you'd all be saying she resisted arrest. Her words struck hard. She described how she enhanced the footage, how she was harassed online, how strangers called her a liar until the FBI confirmed the evidence. I'm 21, she said, voice trembling just once. And I had to do what trained officers refused to. Tell the truth. The courtroom erupted in quiet applause until the judge restored order. By the end of the third day, the walls of denial had crumbled. The jury watched as Travis's own handwriting appeared on a printed memo. File held for leverage. Use if questioned about camera logs. They saw time-stamped proof of him accessing the police evidence database after hours, transferring files to his personal drive. They read messages between him and other officers, joking about memory errors. Each revelation landed like a hammer blow. When it was finally time for the defense, Travis's lawyer made a last-ditch attempt at sympathy. My client served 22 honorable years. He said, he suffers from post-traumatic stress after saving 12 children from a school shooter. He's not a criminal. He's a broken man. Ava stood to respond, voice steady and cold. Your Honor, we all carry scars, but we don't use them as weapons. We don't turn trauma into tyranny. Mr. Callahan didn't make a mistake. He made a choice, again and again. To abuse power and hide behind the shield meant to protect others. The judge nodded for closing statements. Ava stepped forward, her gaze sweeping across the jury. You've seen the videos. You've heard the voices. You've felt the silence of those who can't testify because they didn't survive encounters like these. I ask you, not just as jurors, but as citizens, will you tell the next generation that justice still means something? She paused, the courtroom holding its breath. Because if this badge has a price, then let today be the day we finally pay it in truth. 4 hours later, the verdict was read. On all 8 counts, we find the defendant guilty. The room erupted. Reporters rushed to the aisles, cameras flashing. Travis sank into his chair, head bowed, as Ava closed her eyes and exhaled for the first time in 3 days. Marcus watched from the gallery, tears slipping down his face. The judge's gavel struck once, hard and final. Outside, the crowd exploded into cheers. The steps of the courthouse filled with chants, banners, and camera flashes. Chief Maria Delgado walked out moments later, flanked by aides, her resignation letter in hand, effective immediately. She said into the microphones, I am stepping down. The people deserve better. She turned and left without another word. Ava stood on the courthouse steps, reporters shouting questions. Miss Richardson, how do you feel about the verdict? She looked out over the crowd, then said softly, Justice isn't celebration, it's repair, and the repair starts now. As she turned to leave, the sun broke through the clouds, casting a sharp light across the marble stairs. For the first time in a week, the city of Atlanta stood still, Watching one woman's quiet strength marked the beginning of something larger than the fall of a single man. It was the rebirth of accountability itself. The cell door clanged shut behind Travis Callahan, the sound echoing through the concrete corridor like a final sentence. His once steady hands now shook uncontrollably as he sat on the edge of his bunk, staring at the gray walls that felt like they were closing in. 15 years. The judge had said, 15 years in federal prison without parole. Every word of the verdict still rang in his head. The applause outside, the chants, the cameras. It was all burned into his memory. He'd gone from decorated hero to national disgrace overnight. His uniform had been stripped, his badge melted down for evidence, and his $1, $8 million pension forfeited under the new accountability statute Ava had quietly pushed through the week before the trial. Somewhere, beyond those walls, the world was moving on, but Travis couldn't. He stared at his reflection in the scratched metal mirror and whispered, "How did I end up here?" But deep down, he already knew. The bourbon, the rage, the years of excuses, they'd all led to this. 2 weeks into his sentence, Travis tried to hang himself with a torn shoelace tied to the top bunk, his cellmate, a quiet man serving time for tax fraud. Cut him down before the guards arrived. When the warden asked why he did it, Travis just muttered, "Because I couldn't breathe." He was placed under suicide watch, confined to a padded room with nothing but a paper blanket and his regrets. The headlines called it the fall of a hero, but to the public, it wasn't tragedy, it was justice. The same department that once honored him now scrubbed his name from every record. His commendations pulled from the walls, his face deleted from the website. Marcus Callahan, now legally Marcus Harris, stood outside the courthouse the day the paperwork finalized his name change. He'd waited for that moment his whole life, to be free of the shadow his father cast over him. The judge who signed the order smiled gently. "A new beginning, son," she said. Marcus nodded, clutching the document like a passport out of hell. Reporters surrounded him, asking how he felt testifying against his father. He looked straight into the camera and said, "Justice isn't betrayal, it's love for the truth." His words went viral overnight, shared millions of times under the hashtag "the price of a badge" to many. He became a symbol of the next generation, one that refused to stay silent. Meanwhile, Chief Maria Delgado boarded a one-way flight to Puerto Rico under the cover of night. Her resignation speech had gone viral too, though for different reasons. "I tried to protect the city," she had told the press, "but I protected the wrong people." By the time investigators raided her office, her desk was empty, her campaign headquarters dismantled. The mayor withdrew her endorsement the next morning. Within a month, Delgado vanished from the public eye entirely. Rumors said she bought a small beachfront bar near San Juan, serving tourists who would never know who she used to be, back in Atlanta. Reforms swept through the department like wildfire. Congress slashed the city's police budget by $45 million, redirecting it to the Victim Compensation and Oversight Fund, a program Ava herself had drafted from her hospital bed during recovery. The Tactical Patrol Unit, notorious for excessive force complaints, was disbanded entirely. Every officer was ordered to undergo a 6-month retraining program focused on bias recognition, de-escalation, and lawful procedure. A new mandate required all 2,100 officers to use body cameras with real-time AI auditing, preventing any footage from being deleted, paused, or tampered with. Within months, misconduct complaints dropped by half, for the first time in years. Residents of Atlanta began to feel something they'd almost forgotten: trust. Ava refused to take a single cent of the $15 million awarded to her in damages. Instead, She transferred the entire amount to the Victim Compensation Trust under her name, creating a fund to help those who'd suffered similar abuse. "If the system took from me," she told reporters, "then I'll make sure it gives back tenfold." Her words carried across the country. The Justice Department named her Special Counsel on Civil Rights Accountability, giving her the authority to oversee similar reforms in 10 major cities. She declined the salary and insisted the funds be redirected to community policing grants. "Money won't heal the wound," she said in an interview, "but it can help stop the bleeding." In her office, surrounded by case files and stacks of letters from victims, Ava sometimes paused to look out over the city skyline. The scars on her wrists had faded, but the memory hadn't. She kept a photo of her late mother on her desk, a reminder of why she'd chosen this path. "We finally got them, Mom," she whispered one night. "All of them. But even victory carried a shadow. Every new reform came with resistance, union protests, anonymous threats, smear campaigns on conservative media calling her anti-police, yet none of it shook her. The world could argue all it wanted. The numbers told the truth. Use of force incidents had dropped by 63% in 6 months. Complaints of racial profiling were down 48%. Lives were being saved. That was enough. Jalen Brooks, ever the fighter, took the helm as the city's newly appointed Civil Rights Commissioner. He worked alongside Ava to draft new protocols ensuring independent investigations for every officer-involved death. "If we can't change hearts," he said during one hearing, "we'll change laws until hearts catch up." The crowd gave him a standing ovation. For him, this wasn't just policy. It was redemption for his mother, whose name he'd etched into his office plaque. As for Travis, his days blurred together in slow decay. He spent his mornings sweeping cell blocks, his nights staring at the cracked ceiling. Letters from Marcus went unanswered. He couldn't bear to read them. The guards said he rarely spoke, except for one time when a documentary crew came through filming a segment on police reform. When asked if he regretted what he'd done, he looked straight into the lens and said, "Every second of it. But regret doesn't undo pain. It just lives beside it." That clip, brief as it was, became one of the most shared moments of the year. By the following spring, Atlanta was a different city. The streets that once burned with protest now held candlelight vigils for victims who never got their day in court. Murals of Ava, Kayla, and Marcus appeared across downtown. Portraits painted by young artists who saw in them something powerful, courage that outlived fear. The mural outside City Hall read, "Truth has a cost, but silence costs more," in a small church near Edgewood Avenue. Ava attended a service quietly one Sunday morning. The pastor, a soft-spoken man in his 60s, recognized her and said from the pulpit, "We used to pray for heroes to save us. Maybe the answer was never in heroes, but in those who dared to stand up when no one else would." The congregation rose in applause, and Ava bowed her head, tears welling up, not from pride, but from release. Outside, the city was alive again. Children played in the parks, businesses reopened, and the sirens that once symbolized fear now sounded like a promise of safety. The price of a badge had finally been paid, not just in prison time, or money, or political careers, but in the truth that would outlast them all. Ava stepped into the sunlight, breathed in the humid summer air, and whispered to herself, "Now, we rebuild." The auditorium at Morehouse College was filled to the last seat. 2,000 people, students, officers, victims, and families, sat shoulder to shoulder beneath the golden light spilling from the high rafters. On the massive screen behind the stage, 127 names glowed softly, the names of those compensated under the new Victim Justice Fund. Ava Richardson stood at the podium, hands resting lightly on the edge, her face calm but radiant with conviction. The applause that greeted her wasn't loud and frenzied like it had been during the trial. It was steady, reverent, and full of gratitude. She took a breath, her voice clear, measured, and warm. "Tonight," she began, "we close a chapter, but we also begin a promise. Justice is not a verdict. It's a responsibility that must be carried forward every day by those who still believe in what is right." The crowd hushed as she pointed toward the screen. "These names behind me, they are not statistics. They are fathers, mothers, sons, and daughters. Their pain bought us the truth we stand on today, and that truth will not be forgotten." She announced the creation of the Community Police Oversight Board, an independent civilian body empowered to review misconduct, discipline officers, and monitor reforms in real time. "For the first time in Atlanta's history," she said, "the people, not the politics, will hold the badge accountable." A wave of applause rose through the hall. She continued, laying out the plan, a 6-month retraining curriculum for all 2,100 officers, built on bias recognition, de-escalation, and legal accountability. The curriculum would be mandatory for promotions and funded through the reallocated $45 million previously cut from the police budget. "We will not defund justice," she said firmly. "We will redefine it." In the front row sat Kayla Monroe, now 22, wearing a Spelman honor sash and fighting tears as Ava called her name. "Because one young woman chose to act," Ava said, "the world chose to see." The audience erupted into applause as Kayla walked to the stage, her drone footage projected behind her, a reminder of the power of ordinary people armed only with truth. Ava handed her a folder containing a full-ride scholarship from the Ava Richardson Foundation. Kayla's voice broke as she said, "I didn't do it for fame. I did it because silence is dangerous." Ava smiled gently. "And because you refused silence, thousands will now be heard." In the second row, Marcus Harris sat beside his mother, his eyes fixed on the stage, when Ava invited him up. The room fell quiet. The young man, now freed from his father's name, carried himself with quiet dignity. "I no longer carry the Callahan name," he began, his voice steady but filled with emotion. "But I carry the story of what happened, and I carry it so no one else has to live my mother's nightmare, or my father's mistake." The audience listened intently as he paused. "My father taught me what power can do when it forgets its purpose. Ms. Richardson taught me what courage looks like when it remembers." The crowd rose to their feet in thunderous applause, many wiping tears. Ava placed a hand on his shoulder and whispered, "You turned pain into purpose." "Marcus, that's how change begins." At the back of the room, Jalen Brooks leaned against the wall, arms crossed, a quiet smile on his face. For him, this night was more than victory. It was closure. Years of lawsuits, marches, and grief had finally led here, to a city beginning to heal. He watched as Ava took the stage once more and raised her hand to quiet the room. "We didn't just win a case," she said softly. "We started a movement." As the crowd stood in silence, the large screen behind her flickered to life again, this time showing the faces of those lost to police violence over the years. Black and brown faces of all ages, framed by candles. Ava's voice trembled slightly as she said, "Their stories brought us here. Let's make sure no new names are ever added." The audience bowed their heads. For a long moment, the only sound was the soft hum of the air conditioning and the quiet sobs of those remembering. When Ava stepped down from the stage, the entire auditorium rose in a standing ovation. Cameras flashed, but this time, the focus wasn't on scandal. It was on rebuilding outside. The morning sun crept over the Atlanta skyline, casting warm light through the glass doors as students and officers filed out side by side, talking, not arguing. For the first time in years, Kayla carried her drone in one hand and her scholarship folder in the other. Marcus walked beside her, silent for a few steps before saying, "You know, My dad used to tell me that sunlight exposes everything. Kayla smiled faintly. Then let's keep the lights on. As Ava stood near the exit, looking out at the crowd dispersing into the golden light, a drone rose quietly above the campus. Its camera captured the city bathed in sunrise, the skyline gleaming with promise on its live feed. The screen filled with one final message in white letters: the price of a badge. Justice is not free, but it's worth everything. Ava closed her eyes for a moment, feeling the warmth of the sun against her face. She thought of her mother, of the night in the jail cell, of Travis's hollow stare in court, of the sound of the crowd chanting her name. Every step, every bruise, every tear had led to this, an awakening, not just for a city, but for a nation. When she opened her eyes again, she whispered the words that would echo long after the applause faded. We didn't end something tonight. We began something better. And as the drone climbed higher, sunlight washing the city gold, the story of Ava Richardson became more than news. It became a vow, carried on the wind, promising that truth, once spoken, would never again be silenced. Thank you so much for watching this story. If it moved you, please take a moment to subscribe, like, and share it with someone who still believes in justice and truth.